Oil is often called black gold, but that would be understating its value to humanity. Of all the natural resources on our planet, none have such a far-reaching effect into every single aspect of our lives. From the medicine we take, to the buildings and roads we construct, to the cars we drive and so much more, the heartbeat of civilization pumps crude oil through a vast network of technological progress and industrial growth. 1 barrel of oil can generate energy outputs of between 2,078 and 14,533 hours of human labor. And without it, the world we exist in today would be nothing more than an unattainable dream. In fact, oil is the most commonly used commodity in the world, and despite political pressure to eliminate fossil fuels, it will likely continue to enjoy popularity for decades to come. Oil has also been a catalyst for violence and death, and so many wars throughout history have been all about capturing precious oil reserves, even if their stated intention is often otherwise. Empires rise and fall based on their access to oil, and those who hold great reserves of it hold power and influence over humanity's destiny. On this episode of Commodity Culture, we dive into the black liquid that powers the world to uncover just what makes it such an important resource to humanity. The creation of oil began somewhere between 252 to 541 million years ago in the Paleozoic era, a time marked by something called the Cambrian explosion, a rapid and extraordinary evolution of marine life. As small marine animals and plants, called zooplankton and phytoplankton, ended their life cycles, the dead organic matter sunk onto the ocean floor and mixed with inorganic clay-like materials that came into the ocean through rivers. This dead plankton then trapped sunlight in chemical form, and so the main energy source present in oil is actually the sun. This mixture of plankton, clay-like material, and sunlight is then buried by sediment and transforms into sedimentary rock over time. If it is buried between 2 and 4 kilometers below the ocean floor, the core of the earth heats it up, and the heat, combined with tremendous pressure, transforms it into a waxy substance called kerogen. If the kerogen reaches temperatures that are between 90 and 160 degrees Celsius, it transforms into oil and natural gas. As oil is lighter than water, any pores or openings in the rock above it allow it to escape and be lost forever to the sands of time. But as long as the rock above is thick and impermeable, oil and gas will remain trapped for millions of years until technology is developed to drill and extract it for human use. Once crude oil, also referred to as petroleum, is extracted, it is transported to a refinery via pipelines and then heated and vaporized in a tube furnace. The vaporized oil is then sent into a distillation column for further processing. Oil consists of thousands of different kinds of hydrocarbons, and the refining process separates these, transforming crude oil into a variety of products. Components of petroleum have different boiling points, and so can be separated via distillation. Once the oil vapors reach their boiling temperatures, they revert into liquid form and are collected. Mazut, a component of oil used in lubricant, medicines, cosmetics, motor fuel, and asphalt production, boils above 250 degrees Celsius. Diesel oil, mainly used for motor fuel, reaches its boiling point between 220 and 250 degrees Celsius. Kerosene, used for aviation fuel, heating fuel, and as a solvent for greases and insecticides, boils between 150 and 200 degrees Celsius. Petrol, used as motor fuel, solvent, and in the formation of plastics, boils between 50 and 150 degrees Celsius. Finally, gases used to increase the octane of petrol boil at approximately 100 degrees Celsius. The uses for these various substances I've listed are really just a fraction of what oil and its components can be used for. Oil's insulating and heat-resistant characteristics make it ideal in the construction of electronics such as smartphones, computers, monitors, cameras, and more. Clothing and textiles also use petroleum-based products. This includes polyester, nylon, spandex, shoes, and purses. Sporting goods created with petroleum include tennis rackets, football helmets, basketballs, golf balls, and surfboards. Personal care products like toothpaste, soap, contact lenses, glasses, shampoo, combs, lotions, deodorant, and shaving cream are all made from oil-based products. Furniture, construction materials, appliances, home decor, dishes, pans, musical instruments. I don't think I need to go on. Oil is used in practically every aspect of our modern civilization, but the irony is, it's one of the most hated resources around. Part of that comes from the fact that it is such a catalyst for war, but more on that later. For now, let's take a closer look at how oil is brought out of the earth. The means by which an oil deposit is extracted from the earth depends greatly on its location and geology. Conventional oil is the most common kind of deposit and is drawn from underground reservoirs with traditional drilling and pumping methods. Conventional oil remains liquid at atmospheric pressure and temperature, so it flows through a well core and a pipeline without difficulty. Conventional is generally easier and more cost-effective to extract compared to other varieties. Unconventional oil refers to oil that is too difficult to recover using traditional drilling and pumping methods, and often means the oil is heavier in substance and so does not flow easily. These kinds of deposits require a more advanced extraction process. Oil sands are one example of an unconventional deposit, and as long as it lies within 200 feet of the Earth's surface, oil can be extracted. Oil sands contain a naturally occurring combination of water, sand, and clay soaked with bitumen, a dense and viscous form of petroleum. There are a variety of extraction methods that can be used on these kinds of deposits, such as cyclic steam stimulation, steam-assisted gravity drainage, and vapor extraction, among others. For unconventional oil deposits that lie deeper in the earth, in situ recovery is required for extraction. In situ, meaning in place, is a method used to recover a variety of resources, but in the case of oil, the bitumen is separated from sand by heating it to a temperature that converts it into fluid and thus allows it to be pumped to the surface. Offshore oil extraction first requires seismic surveys using advanced sound energy technology to map geological structures beneath the seabed. This provides crucial information on the depth, position, and quantity of potential oil and gas-bearing underground formations. Once deposits are discovered, an often lengthy development process begins and production facilities are built to drill deep beneath the sea and access the discovered oil, in what can be one of the most challenging extraction methods. As conventional oil deposits become more and more scarce, new methods of more easily extracting unconventional resources are constantly being developed to meet humanity's steady demand for more oil. Oil has a long history of being put to use on planet Earth for a wide variety of purposes. The Mesopotamians used it in the creation of jewelry and mosaics as far back as 3100 BC. Egyptians employed oil in the embalming of mummies in 2600 BC, and Greeks used it as fuel for lamps around the same time. The Babylonians were known to apply oil to their boats as a form of waterproofing, and in the Western world, oil's first major use was in the creation of kerosene for lighting. Indeed, oil has been and continues to be the world's most sought-after commodity, which seems to have a limitless number of uses. One of the earliest and biggest producers of oil for industrial use was Baku in Azerbaijan. In fact, the world's first mechanized oil drills were built and employed there in 1847, and primitive wooden ships built to transport it also debuted in the region, the world's first oil tankers. By the early 1900s, Baku had become the #1 oil-producing region on the planet, and some of the first oil baron families from Europe, the Rothschild and the Nobels, owned the majority of the fields in the area. We shall keep Baku in mind as we delve into one of the unfortunate but nonetheless vitally important uses for oil: to operate and maintain the machines of war. Oil has played a central role in a variety of conflicts throughout history, but perhaps none greater than World War II, where both American oil superiority and fierce Russian defense of the oil fields in Baku led to Hitler's defeat at the hands of the Allied forces. World War I was one of the first industrialized conflicts, and oil allowed the creation and operation of tanks, planes, ships, and other means of weaponized transportation, in addition to mortars, bombs, and pretty much everything we now consider to be a part of modern warfare. In World War II, oil was a key component in the German blitzkrieg style of attack, a method that involved rapidly storming enemy territory with tanks, planes, mortars, and troops on the ground before adversaries had a chance to gather their wits and formulate a counterattack. This required a tremendous amount of fuel, and as the war dragged on and oil reserves became scarcer, the Germans were forced to focus on acquiring more oil before they could continue their aggressive advance. On the Allied side, the American petroleum engineers were the first to formulate 100-octane fuel for aircraft. This gave their Spitfire planes a massive advantage over German and Japanese fighter planes in terms of maneuverability, speed, and torque, and thus led to a dominance previously unseen in air-to-air combat. World War II was largely won due to American oil supply advantage, and when Hitler realized this, he altered course in Russia, and against all his advisors' recommendations, was set on capturing the great oil fields of Baku instead of focusing on more strategically advantageous targets in the short term. He knew that if new reserves of oil were not captured, he could never win the long game. And in what would be his final major effort, his advance was halted in the treacherous and difficult-to-navigate Caucasus Mountains, where Russian troops adept in the terrain were able to outsmart and outfight the Nazi forces, thus cutting them off from much-needed oil and spelling the beginning of the end for Hitler's dreams of world domination. War. War never changes. And in the myriad of conflicts that have erupted all over the globe since World War II, oil has often been at the center of these conflicts, whether as a fuel that could provide a strategic advantage in combat, or as a source of energy that nations desire to advance their societies and gain a technological advantage in times of peace. One cannot discuss the history of oil without mentioning the rise of the automobile. In fact, the invention of the first cars and their later widespread adoption may have saved the oil industry in its early days, when its wide range of uses was not yet known. The 1950s in America saw a major boom in the oil industry, driven by the automobile, and the West's rising obsession with oil became a full-blown addiction. Between 1945 and 1950, the number of cars on the road in the U.S. jumped from 26 million up to 40 million. This new era of cars for all enabled the suburban lifestyle we know today, by allowing people to move further away from city centers thanks to the convenience and speed of transportation provided by these early gas guzzlers. And guzzlers they were. Fuel-inefficient muscle cars with 400 horsepower V8 engines caused the use of gasoline to skyrocket, and for a time, the American dream revolved around fast cars with no signs of slowing down. Things did slow down, however, and by the time America realized that its growing dependence on foreign oil reserves was becoming an issue, it was already too late to react. Massive amounts of imported oil began entering the country in the 1960s, and when the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, placed an oil embargo on the U.S. in 1973, there was panic at the pumps, as massive gasoline shortages rocked the nation. This spilled over into the 1970s and 80s, causing economic woes that deeply affected society across the board. To remedy the situation, the U.S. was able to intervene in the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq in 1991, under the pretense of protecting democracy. The ensuing Gulf War saw American forces engage in widespread bombing of Iraqi targets, along with the now famous Operation Desert Storm ground assault, and after the conflict was largely resolved, a steady supply of oil to the West was secured at reasonable prices. You know, in the name of freedom. Remember what I said about war never changing? In 2021, there's a lot of talk about reducing fossil fuels and fully electrifying vehicles and other infrastructure, and so oil is in a place where it is both shunned and hated by many. However, many anti-fossil fuel policies seem to assume that all the materials needed to advance electrification are readily available, when nothing could be farther from the truth. Copper alone, but a single essential component among many, is an extremely scarce supply, with no new production set to come online anytime soon, and the same holds true for many other resources vital to electrification. In addition, we still have a ton of gasoline-powered vehicles both on the road and under construction. Combine this situation with some of the most incompetent, corrupt, and misguided leadership in place in a very long time in many world governments, and you get astoundingly short-sighted policies being implemented, such as US President Joe Biden's decision to halt construction of the Keystone XL pipeline, a vital piece of infrastructure and an important part of America's energy economy. On top of all this, unprecedented government debt and reckless fiscal policy seems to be the order of the day in so many nations. This causes a devaluation of currencies and handicaps our economic ability to advance clean energy and eliminate the use of fossil fuels over the long run. Taking all these factors into account and keeping in mind the world's daily oil requirements are still sitting at a healthy 90 million barrels a day, I don't see oil going anywhere anytime soon. Even when we look far into the future and imagine a fully electrified planet, oil will still be needed for a massive amount of items that make up our modern civilization, as I mentioned at the start of the program. For now, the lofty ideals of a carbon-neutral planet are about to come up against the hard realities of our situation. And in my view, when the dust settles, oil will still be king. Commodity Culture is a series that covers the history and culture surrounding commodities and natural resources. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, please subscribe and hit the bell notification to ensure you are always alerted of the latest episodes.